In the sprawling, restless city of Miami lived a young woman named Clara Harper. To the wealthy patrons she served and the hurried crowd she navigated, she was nearly invisible, just another girl on a beat-up scooter delivering food in the rain, her hands raw from the cold, her face turned down against the wind. She blended into the background of South Beach restaurants and Brickell high-rises, a shadow passing through gilded lobbies with bags of still-warm pasta and sushi, gone before anyone could meet her eyes. Her scooter sputtered and wheezed like a dying animal as she cut through the evening traffic. The engine coughed at red lights. The handlebars shook when she accelerated. She knew every repair it needed and none of them were coming. She had $17 in her wallet. 17. That number had to stretch across 3 days and 4 delivery shifts until Friday tips came in, if they came in at all. The converted garage behind Marcus Webb's rental property had become her world. 8 feet by 12 feet, a corrugated metal roof that leaked whenever rain fell harder than a whisper, concrete floors stained with rust and things she did not want to identify. She paid no official rent. That was the arrangement Marcus Webb had made clear during her first week, 8 years ago. Pay in cash, or pay in other ways. She had chosen the cash, and the refusals that came with it had left marks on her back like a terrible map of places she never wanted to revisit. At 2 in the morning, she sat cross-legged on her mattress with accounting textbooks spread across the blanket, her studying materials lit by a single lamp she had salvaged from a dumpster behind a hotel. The textbook pages were yellowed, but the numbers were clear. She understood balance sheets. She understood profit and loss. She understood that her own life was bleeding money she did not have, and no amount of studying would fix the fundamental mathematics of her desperation. The foreclosure notice sat in the drawer beside her bed, creases worn soft from opening and closing it 100 times. $150,000. That was the number now. Property taxes. Legal fees. The cost of existing on land someone else owned. 12 days until the deadline. 12 days before everything became officially, legally, permanently gone. She had been studying accounting to escape this life, to become invisible in a different way, invisible not because she was poor, but because she would be competent, professional, useful. It had taken 4 years of night school and double shifts. She was 6 months from graduating. The timing of the foreclosure felt like a curse designed specifically for her. The rain outside the garage intensified around 3 in the morning. She listened to it drumming on the metal roof, a sound like 10,000 impatient fingers, and she did not cry because crying was a waste of salt her body could not afford to lose. On a clearing winter night, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon, the sky opened into sharpness. Stars cut through the darkness like diamonds pressed into black velvet. Frost coated the limestone steps leading up to the small stone church on the outskirts of Miami, a place so old it remembered a different city, a different world. Clara had finished her last delivery of the evening, pad thai to a couple on the 42nd floor of a building that made her scooter seem like a child's toy. The church was on her route home, not far from the converted garage. She had never been inside it before, but her feet carried her there anyway, pulled by something she could not name. Exhaustion, maybe. The need for quiet that did not exist anywhere else. The heavy wooden doors creaked when she pushed them open. Candles flickered in the alcoves. The air smelled like old stone and melted wax and something else, something copper and sharp that did not belong. A man stumbled through a side entrance, his white dress shirt torn open, blood seeping through the fabric in a dark bloom that spread wider with each ragged breath he took. His face was pale under the harsh fluorescent lights mounted on the stone walls. He wore an expensive suit jacket that cost more than everything Clara owned, but it hung damaged now, one sleeve torn, the fabric stained with something wet and terrible. She did not hesitate. 8 years of surviving had taught her that hesitation was a luxury only safe people could afford. She moved toward him, her delivery uniform still damp from earlier rain, and she did not ask questions. "I need help," the man gasped. His accent was thick, Italian, his words shaped by a mouthful of pain. "I need." "Sit," Clara said. Her voice came out steady, the voice of someone who had learned not to fracture under pressure. "Can you sit?" The man sank onto one of the wooden pews, his hand pressed against his shoulder where the blood was flowing hardest. His teeth were gritted so tightly she could see the muscles working in his jaw. Clara unwrapped her scarf, the thin grey scarf that was supposed to protect her from the November cold, and tore it into strips with hands that did not shake. She had never done this before, but her body seemed to know what to do. She pressed the first strip hard against the wound, applied pressure the way she had seen done once in a hospital waiting room years ago. The man gasped, a sound caught between a cry and a prayer. His eyes met hers, dark and burning with pain, but something else too. Shock, maybe. Disbelief that a stranger in a delivery uniform was saving his life inside a church that had probably not seen violence in 100 years. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice thin now, fading. "Clara," she said. She pressed harder, watching the blood soak through the grey fabric. "Do not talk. Just breathe. In and out. In and out." "You do not know who I am," he said. "I do not care who you are," Clara replied. "You are hurt. I am helping. That is all." The man's grip on her wrist tightened, his fingers cold and slick with his own blood. "Enzo," he said. "My name is Enzo. And you just changed everything, Piccola. You just changed everything." She worked steadily, replacing the soaked strips with fresh ones, keeping pressure on the wound until the bleeding began to slow. The silence of the church surrounded them, vast and ancient, filled only with Enzo's ragged breathing and the soft splash of water from the fountain near the altar. When his breathing steadied, when the blood had slowed to a manageable seep, Clara helped him to his feet. He leaned heavily on her shoulder, his arm wrapped around her neck, his weight pressing down, but she did not falter. She guided him outside to the empty street where a taxi was parked, its driver smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper. "Hospital," Clara told the driver, giving him the name of the nearest one. She had no money to pay, but she did not think about that. "St. Mary's. Room 317. "Tell them he needs," she stopped, realizing she did not know what to tell them. "Tell them a gunshot wound." Enzo gripped her hand one last time before the taxi pulled away from the curb. His eyes, dark and intense, held hers for as long as the distance allowed. Then red taillights disappeared into the Miami traffic, carrying him away into a night that suddenly felt enormous and dangerous. Clara stood alone on the cold street, her scarf destroyed, her delivery uniform soaked with blood that was not hers. The church doors stood open behind her like a mouth mid-sentence. She did not know that the man she had just saved was Rafael Marino's most trusted lieutenant. She did not know that by morning, her invisible life would crack open like an egg, spilling light and darkness into places she had worked so hard to keep hidden. She knew only that her hands were shaking now, that the adrenaline was draining away, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that went bone deep. She walked back toward the converted garage, her feet carrying her through streets that suddenly felt different. Watching her. Waiting for something to begin. The rain started again as she reached the property line of Marcus Webb's rental house. Through the main house windows, she could see him there, standing in the kitchen with a glass of red wine, his gaze turned toward the garage where her small light still burned. He was watching for her. He was always watching. Clara let herself into the garage quietly, latched the door, and lay down on her mattress without changing out of her blood-stained uniform. She lay there in the darkness, listening to the rain, understanding that something had shifted in the architecture of her world. She did not know how much was about to change. She did not know that Rafael Marino, the man whose lieutenant she had just saved, was already learning her name. That his black convoy was already moving through Miami's rain-soaked streets. That by tomorrow morning, $17 and a crumpled foreclosure notice would be all that remained of the invisible life she had built for herself. What changed everything was a single choice made in a moment of grace, inside a stone church where God and violence had met in the dark. 5 in the morning arrived like a thief, stealing darkness and replacing it with grey Miami light that filtered through a single high window. Clara Harper's eyes opened before the alarm could sound. Her body had learned to wake itself, had learned to extract every second of value from time that belonged to everyone but her. The converted garage was 10 feet by 12, a space that had cost her nothing because Marcus Webb preferred payment in forms that left no paper trail. A hot plate sat beside a mini-fridge the size of a showbox. Her accounting textbooks were stacked in towers around a mattress on the floor, their spines facing outward like soldiers at attention. She had been in night school for 6 years, pushing toward a degree that felt like a mountain she could see but never quite reach. Clara pulled on her delivery uniform, a faded blue polo with the taste of Miami logo peeling across the chest. The fabric was thin from washing, and where the seams had split, she had stitched them back together with white thread that showed. She braided her dark hair, still damp from the previous night's shower, and tied it with a rubber band she had found in the parking lot. No one was looking at her carefully enough to notice these details. Invisibility was its own kind of armor. The scooter waited outside under a tarp that barely held together. She had purchased it 8 years ago with 3 months of doubled shifts, and it had been dying ever since. The engine turned over with a sound like something choking. She checked the oil by memory, added what she could from a half-empty bottle, and examined the seat where new cracks had opened across the black vinyl. She taped over them with grey duct tape, pressing each strip down with her thumb. The machine would hold another day. It always held another day. From a coffee can hidden behind the refrigerator, Clara withdrew her remaining money. $17. 1 5, 2 ones, 7 coins that meant something only because they bought her time until Friday when the restaurant paid out. She counted them 3 times, not because the number might change, but because counting them felt like a prayer. $17 until Friday. That meant gas for the scooter, and coffee she would not drink, and nothing else. The rain had started before dawn, the kind that came off the Atlantic with a weight that bent everything it touched. She rode through Miami streets with her insulated delivery bag strapped across her chest, the machine sputtering beneath her, the rain soaking through her jacket in steady increments. The smell of exhaust and damp asphalt filled her lungs. Her hands grew numb on the handlebars. The first delivery of the morning went to a mansion in Coral Gables where the drive alone was longer than most people's houses. A woman in white tennis clothes stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face arranged in an expression of professional disappointment. She took the food without greeting, examined the container for 45 seconds, and said, "It's lukewarm. I ordered this for 7:30. "I'm sorry," Clara said. Traffic was heavy from the restaurant. The woman closed the door. No tip. Not even eye contact. Clara stood there for a moment in the rain, feeling the weight of the insulated bag pull against her shoulder, feeling the $17 in her pocket feel smaller with each breath. By 9 that evening, she had completed 18 deliveries and collected $12 in tips. The scooter's engine made a new sound now, a grinding noise that meant something was failing. She coasted into the parking lot of Marcus Webb's rental property, pushing the machine toward the converted garage where she lived. Marcus was waiting. He stepped out from the shadows beside the main house, his bulk blocking the path forward. 47 years old, thick-necked, wearing a stained polo shirt with sweat rings beneath the arms. His face had the permanent redness of a man who drank too much and slept badly. Behind him, through the house windows, she could see the glow of a television and the silhouette of someone moving inside. "Rent's due," he said. His voice carried no question in it. This was conversation he had rehearsed 1,000 times, with 1,000 different women in 1,000 different garages. Clara kept moving, edging sideways. "I have half by the 15th. "That's not what we agreed to." She stopped walking. The rain dripped from her hair down her spine. "We agreed I pay rent." "I am paying rent." "You agreed to pay rent and be reasonable about the terms." He smiled then, the kind of smile that happens when a man is certain of his power. It was an oil-slick smile, slippery and dark. "Your choice, Clara. But choices have consequences." She didn't respond. She never responded. Responding meant engaging, and engagement meant negotiation, and negotiation meant she might somehow lose even this. She moved past him, and he let her, the smell of whiskey following her like a ghost. Inside the garage, she locked the door and checked it twice. Then a third time. The space was so small that she could lie on the mattress and touch both walls by stretching her arms. She pulled a piece of paper from beneath the mattress, the crumpled foreclosure notice she had been carrying for 3 weeks. The property was being sold. End of the month. $150,000, or the conversion that was her entire life, would vanish. She had $84 to her name. The accounting textbook sat open on the floor, pages illuminated by the single bare bulb that hung from the ceiling. Clara opened her laptop and stared at the screen, knowing that somewhere in algorithms and patterns was the answer to staying alive, staying housed, staying ahead of the mathematics of her own ruin. She had completed 43 credits toward her degree. She needed 16 more. Even if she finished in the spring, the job she could get would pay $20,000 a year. It would take 7 years to save $150,000. She had 4 weeks. Footsteps moved across the property outside. Heavy footsteps. She froze, her hand still on the keyboard, listening to the sound of them pass the garage door. Pause for a moment. He was listening, she understood, checking to see if she was moving around, if she was awake, then continue toward the street. When silence returned, Clara pulled off her uniform and lay down on the mattress, still damp from the rain. She did not change into dry clothes. She simply lay there in the darkness, her back aching from old wounds she never discussed, her mind moving through the mathematics of survival. $17. $56 until Friday. $320 until the end of the month. Not enough. Never enough. She did not know that 3 blocks away, in the emergency room of Jackson Memorial Hospital, a man lay bleeding on a white table. She did not know that this man belonged to Rafael Marino. She did not know that in 17 hours, her entire invisible life would splinter. What she knew was the weight of rain on the metal roof above her head. What she knew was the temperature dropping, the way her breath came out visible in the cold. What she knew was the mathematics of her own disappearance, slow, relentless, inevitable as tide. And then, as if the universe was responding to something she had not yet spoken aloud, the sound of a motorcycle engine entered the street outside. The rider passed slowly, the headlight briefly illuminating the gap beneath her garage door. Then silence returned. Complete, absolute silence. The kind of silence that meant something was about to begin. The blizzard came without mercy. One moment, the mountain highway stretched clear beneath a winter sky so sharp it seemed to cut, and the next moment the world dissolved into white chaos. Clara Harper leaned forward on her scooter, squinting through the snow that was already plastering her windshield, her thin jacket offering nothing against the cold that bit through every layer she owned. The delivery bag sat strapped across her chest, a catering order bound for a private home 70 miles north, the kind of distance that paid triple her normal rate. $51. $51 that would bring her to $68 by Friday. Enough to eat something besides instant noodles for 2 days. The weather report had warned of a system moving in by evening. Clara had taken the job anyway. Her scooter coughed. Then coughed again. The engine sputtered like something dying, losing power as the wind howled around her, and Clara's hands tightened on the handlebars. No. Not here. Not now. She pulled to the shoulder of the empty highway, the asphalt beneath her tires turning slick with accumulating snow. The engine gave one final, desperate wheeze and went silent. She sat there for 3 seconds, her breath coming in visible clouds, her mind calculating. The temperature was dropping. The visibility was maybe 30 feet. She had no cell signal. She checked her phone with fingers already going numb, and the nearest town was 12 miles back the way she came. Clara got off the scooter and tried to restart it. The engine turned over but would not catch. She tried again. Again. The 5th attempt produced nothing but a grinding sound that made her heart sink like a stone. She abandoned the machine on the shoulder, the delivery bag still strapped across her chest because a lost deposit meant 3 fewer meals next week, 3 meals she could not afford to lose. The wind hit her like a physical blow when she started walking, cutting through her jacket as if the fabric was paper. Snow stuck to her hair, melted against her skin, refroze. Her breath came in short, frozen gasps. The $17 in her pocket felt like air. The crumpled foreclosure notice in her jacket, the one that had arrived that morning, felt heavier than the delivery bag. 12 days. $150,000. The mathematics of it was a prayer as she had stopped praying. She had been walking for maybe 18 minutes when she saw the headlights. 3 pairs of them, cutting through the storm like searchlights through fog, growing larger, closer, the sound of powerful engines breaking through the howl of wind. 3 black SUVs, the kind that meant money and power and the kind of people who moved through the world unquestioned. They slowed as they approached her, and Clara's survival instinct, honed by 8 years with Marcus Webb, told her to step back from the road. The center vehicle stopped. The window descended with a soft mechanical whisper. Inside sat a man who seemed carved from the cold itself. Rafael Moreno was 42 years old, though his eyes held the weight of someone much older. Dark hair, shot through with silver at the temples. A scar ran along his jawline, from the corner of his eye to the edge of his chin, the kind of scar that told stories about nights that ended badly for someone. He wore an open-necked white shirt beneath a cashmere coat that cost more than Clara made in 4 months, and when he looked at her, this shivering delivery girl standing alone on a highway in the middle of a blizzard, something shifted behind his eyes. His voice came out like calm thunder, absolute and without question. "Get in." Clara hesitated. The driver, a man whose shoulders seemed too broad for the seat, started to lean back an object. Rafael raised one hand, and the objection died unspoken. The car fell into obedient silence. She moved toward the SUV, her legs barely responding to her commands, her fingers fumbling with the door handle. The heat inside wrapped around her like a blanket, overwhelming after the cutting cold. She collapsed into the leather seat, shaking so hard she could barely keep her hand still. Rafael did not speak. He simply gestured to the driver, who continued forward into the white chaos of the storm. After a moment, Rafael unfolded his cashmere coat and draped it over her shoulders without a word. The fabric held the warmth of his body and the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something metallic, gun oil, she understood, though she said nothing. The convoy cut through the blizzard like sharks through dark water. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the snow. The radio crackled occasionally with static and words Clara could not quite understand. Time became strange in the heat and the silence. She could not tell if they had been driving for 15 minutes or an hour when the storm seemed to part suddenly and lights bloomed ahead. The mountain lodge materialized out of the white like something from a dream. It was the kind of house that existed in magazines Clara would never buy, built of dark wood and stone, with floor-to-ceiling windows that blazed with golden light. Snow piled against the glass like someone was trying to push in from the outside. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys, and the wind carried the scent of burning cedar even from outside. The SUV pulled beneath a covered entryway and stopped. Rafael moved first, opening his door to the cold. He came around and opened hers, extending a hand to help her out. She took it without thinking. His grip was warm, steady, absolutely certain, and stepped onto the heated entryway stone. Inside, the lodge unfolded into spaces that seemed impossible. A vast living area with ceilings that soared toward wooden beams, a fireplace so large a person could stand upright inside it, and a fire burning with such intensity that the heat reached across the room like an open hand. Thick Persian rugs covered hardwood that gleamed like dark water. Leather furniture arranged in careful conversation groups. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, snow continuing to fall against the glass like the world outside was being erased. Clara stood dripping on the hardwood floor, still clutching her empty delivery bag, still wearing Rafael's coat. Around her, men in dark suits moved with the kind of coordinated grace that spoke of long practice and deep training. Rafael gestured to 2 of them. One was broad-shouldered, with the face of someone who had made difficult choices and accepted the consequences. The other was younger, with dark eyes that met Clara's and then quickly looked away. "Get her dry clothes," Rafael said to them, his voice still that calm thunder. "Something warm." The 2 men exchanged a look, the kind of look that passes between people who have worked together for years. In 15 years of serving Rafael Moreno, they had never seen him like this. Never seen him stop for anyone on a roadside. Never seen him offer his coat. Carlo, the broader man, inclined his head slightly. Of course, sir. Enzo, the younger one, moved toward a hallway. Carlo gestured for Clara to follow him. Come. There is a bathroom through here. We will have dry things waiting. Clara moved in a dream, still shaking, still unable to quite believe that the scooter, the cold, the walk had led here, to this place of firelight and impossible warmth. The clothes they provided were oversized, men's sweatpants cinched with a drawstring, a thermal shirt that hung past her hips, but they were dry, and they were warm, and when she emerged from the bathroom, her own clothes hung by the fireplace, steam rising slowly from the fabric. Rafael had not moved. He sat in one of the leather chairs, 2 cups of coffee resting on the table between them. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit, he said. Your clothes will dry. The roads are closed until the storm passes. You will stay here tonight. Clara sat, her body feeling like it was made of something fragile that might break with the wrong movement. The coffee smelled rich, real coffee, the kind that cost money. She wrapped her hands around the cup and held it without drinking. I cannot stay, she said, her voice trembling. I have another delivery. I will lose my job. I cannot afford. The roads are closed, Rafael said, and his tone suggested this was not a matter for discussion. No one is going anywhere tonight. The fire crackled. Wind howled against the windows, testing the glass, finding no weakness. What is your name? Rafael asked. Clara. Clara Harper. What were you doing on that highway, Clara? She told him about the scooter, the delivery job, the need for extra money. About the rates that tripled for longer distances, the chance she could not pass up. He listened without interrupting, his dark eyes watching her with an intensity that should have frightened her but somehow did not. What do you do in that family business you mentioned? She asked carefully. He answered without evasion. Import. Export. Protection. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. I run operations across the southeastern United States. I have been doing it for 20 years. Clara understood what that meant. She had lived in Miami long enough to know what protection meant in that context. But she also understood survival, understood that survival took many forms and was not always clean. As the night deepened and the fire burned lower, the isolation and the heat seemed to loosen something inside her. She heard herself speaking, offering pieces of her life to this stranger in a cashmere coat as if the warmth of the room had burned away her usual caution. She told him about Marcus Webb. 8 years as her landlord. 8 years of refusing what he wanted, refusing the favors he demanded, the intimacy he was not entitled to take. The way his hands would reach for her when she brought him rent payments. The basement room where he cornered her once, and the scars that resulted, running across her back like a map of hell, delivered with his belt when no one was listening, never reported because she had nowhere else to go and no one who would believe her anyway. Across the room, Carlo and Enzo saw Rafael's hands tighten on the armrests of his chair, his knuckles going white. But Clara did not notice. She kept talking, her voice gaining speed, her words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. I need $150,000 in 12 days, she said. $150,000. That is what they're demanding. The garage I rent, the place I live, they are foreclosing. I would need to work for 3 years without eating, without paying rent to save that. $150,000. It might as well be 150 million. Rafael leaned forward, his scarred face caught in the firelight. I have a brother, he said quietly. Blood of my blood. 5 years ago, he sold our family to our enemies. He betrayed everything we built, everything we were. I had to choose between mercy and survival. He paused, and Clara saw the weight of that choice written across every line of his face. I chose survival, Rafael said. My brother disappeared. I have carried that choice like a stone ever since. But I know what it costs to survive, Clara. I know what you give up. And I know what it means to be invisible. She met his eyes, and something shifted between them. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not salvation. But recognition. The acknowledgement that they both knew what scars looked like, both understood the mathematics of survival. The wind outside turned vicious, throwing snow at the windows with renewed fury. The fire crackled, and in that moment, suspended between the storm outside and the warmth within, Clara Harper believed for the first time in years that rescue might actually be real. But what she did not know, what she could not possibly know, was that her phone had finally found signal. A text message had been waiting for nearly an hour. Sophie Langford, the woman who now controlled the property Clara rented, had sent word through one of her intermediaries. The eviction was being accelerated. They were giving her no more than 12 days. They were coming for everything. And in the same moment that Clara's phone buzzed with that message, Rafael's phone buzzed with another. He had already made calls. By morning, 15 men would arrive at the mountain lodge with information that would change everything. By morning, Rafael Marino would know exactly who Marcus Webb was, and what he had done, and exactly how much Clara Harper was worth fighting for. The fire burned on, and the storm raged outside, and neither of them yet understood that mercy, like the storm itself, had only just begun. The morning broke clean and freezing over the mountain lodge. Frost coated every surface like crushed diamonds, and the storm that had raged through the night had finally passed, leaving the world suspended in terrible clarity. The sky stretched pale and empty above the peaks, and Clara Harper woke on the leather couch, disoriented, a wool blanket tucked around her shoulders that she did not remember pulling up. She sat slowly, her body stiff from the cold despite the fire that still burned in the hearth, and looked toward the windows. Rafael stood there, motionless. Phone pressed to his ear. His voice moved through the lodge in rapid Italian, fragments of names and locations, and a word she caught: Webb. 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 The name hit her like a stone thrown into still water. He was speaking about Marcus. He knew. The realization arrived without warning, and Clara's breath caught in her throat. Rafael ended the call and turned to face her, and in that moment his expression was not gentle. It was something else entirely. Something dark and purposeful, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "My men will take you home," he said, his voice low and steady. "But first, there is something you need to see." The convoy moved through Miami's morning traffic like a school of predators. 15 black SUVs, tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that made other drivers unconsciously move aside, that made red lights seem to wait. Clara sat in the second vehicle, Rafael beside her, not speaking. The city passed in a blur of storefronts and empty streets, and at exactly 10 in the morning, they turned onto the block where Marcus Webb's rental property stood. The block where Clara Harper had lived in a converted garage for 8 years. The block where her entire survival had hinged on a man's mercy, and his mercy was a myth. The convoy stopped. All 15 vehicles, one after another, parking with synchronized precision. The men emerged from the SUVs in formation, Carlo and Enzo first, their shoulders broad as doorways, followed by 13 others she did not recognize. Dark suits. Dark expressions. Controlled menace radiating from them like heat off pavement. They stood in front of Marcus Webb's property without speaking, without moving, just existing in that space with the weight of an executed sentence. Marcus Webb stood on his front porch, his face the color of old newspaper. His hand shook. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Behind the wall of men, Sophie Langford sat in her Mercedes, engine running, watching through tinted windows. The color drained from her face as the reality of what was happening crystallized. This was not negotiation. This was not legal process. This was something else entirely. Clara stepped out of the vehicle. Rafael emerged behind her. She looked at him, looked at these 15 men, these soldiers arrayed before her like an answer to prayers she had stopped praying years ago. Her voice came out barely a whisper. "What is this?" "Justice," Rafael said. He did not smile. Carlo walked toward Marcus Webb with the deliberate pace of a man who had done this many times before. He unfolded a document, its pages crisp and official, and began to read in a carrying voice that cut through the morning air like a knife through silence. Marcus Webb, this property has been purchased by Marino Holdings. Effective immediately, you are being evicted. You have 1 hour to remove your personal effects. Marcus sputtered. His face reddened. He looked for allies that would not come, looked for rescue from a world that no longer recognized him. This is illegal. I will call the police. I will call my lawyer. I will. You will do nothing, Carlo continued, his voice flat as a blade. We have documented 8 years of harassment, assault, and extortion against Miss Harper and 17 other tenants. Intimidation. Threats. Sexual coercion. The evidence has been forwarded to the Miami-Dade District Attorney's Office. You may call anyone you wish. They are expecting your call. Sophie Langford emerged from her Mercedes, her heels clicking against the concrete with sharp, desperate precision. This is illegal seizure. I have rights. I will have your... Rafael's voice cut through hers like thunder through silence. You will have nothing, Miss Langford. Your entire rental consortium has been audited by federal investigators as of 6 this morning. Fraud spanning 17 years. Tax evasion. Racketeering. Predatory lending practices. You should answer your phone. As if on cue, Sophie's phone began ringing. The sound was shrill and relentless. She stared at it like it was a coiled snake. The screen showed a blocked number. She did not answer. Another call came. Then another. By the 4th call, her hands had begun to shake. Marcus Webb, cornered and desperate, his survival instinct finally breaking through his terror, made a decision that would cost him everything. He lunged toward Clara, his face twisted with rage and fear, screaming words meant to wound. This is your fault, you little... He never finished the sentence. Enzo caught him by the throat with a single hand and lifted him off the ground like he was lifting a child's doll. Marcus's eyes bulged. His fingers clawed uselessly at Enzo's arm, drawing no blood, causing no damage, accomplishing nothing but the desperate flailing of a man whose world had ended. The smell of his fierce sweat hung thick in the cold morning air. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out anymore. Just the sound of him choking. Clara stepped forward. She looked into Marcus Webb's bulging, terrified eyes, and she spoke words she had held locked in her chest for 8 years, words that tasted like rust and ashes and final truth. You do not own me. You never did. Enzo released him. Marcus collapsed to the ground, gasping, sobbing, the sound of a man's world ending in real time. Rafael made a phone call. He spoke 3 words in Italian, words that sounded like a sentence being carried out. Within moments, 2 more SUVs arrived on the block. Different vehicles. Different men emerged from them. Not Rafael's soldiers, other suits, other energy, the unmistakable bearing of a rival family's enforcement team. These were Santoro men. Carlo leaned close to Clara, his voice barely a whisper so only she could hear. The Santoro family. Marcus Webb sold them contaminated product 2 years ago. 3 of their people died. They have been waiting for Rafael to give them an opportunity. Marcus Webb recognized them the moment he saw them. He recognized the particular cut of their suits, the particular coldness in their eyes, the particular brand of violence they carried. He began to scream. His screams were animal sounds, primal, the sounds of a man understanding that the mercy he had never extended to anyone was not going to be extended to him. Mercy is not mine to give, Rafael said, his voice stone. You are theirs now. The Santoro men moved with efficiency. Marcus Webb was dragged toward their vehicle, his screams echoing off the buildings around him, his fingernails scraping marks into the concrete driveway that would remain long after he was gone. The rear door of the SUV opened. He was forced inside. The door closed. The engine started. The vehicles turned and drove away, carrying Marcus Webb into a future he would not survive. He was never seen again. Sophie Langford tried to run toward her Mercedes. She made it 2 steps before FBI agents blocked her path. They had arrived silently, efficiently, in windbreakers marked with gold letters. The agents moved with the practiced calm of people accustomed to arresting powerful people. Handcuffs clicked. Sophie's wrists were drawn behind her back. An agent read her Miranda rights in a voice that held no anger, just procedure, just the mechanical recitation of a system finally functioning the way it was designed to function. Neighbors emerged from their homes to watch. News crews arrived within moments, their cameras beginning to record the systematic destruction of Sophie Langford's empire in real time. Clara stood beside Rafael, 15 men arranged in formation around her, and she understood in that moment that some debts demand payment, and that mercy, real mercy, is not gentle. It is not soft. It is the removal of a hand that has held you down. Rafael turned to face her. His expression had shifted. The hardness had receded, leaving something else beneath it. Something that looked almost like tenderness, though tenderness seemed too small a word for what his eyes held. "The property is yours," he said. "No rent. No landlord. No more running." She looked at him, and tears began to stream down her face before she could stop them. "Why? Why would you do this?" He reached out and touched her face, his hand gentle as snowfall, a man capable of the darkest violence now choosing the softest touch. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of years of surviving, finally choosing to live. "Because seeing you broken on that highway showed me what mercy actually costs. And I have spent my life surviving when I was meant to be living." 1 year later, Clara stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of a penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay, the city's lights spreading below her like fallen stars scattered across black water. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loose, success settling on her shoulders the way silk settles on skin. The Miami night pressed against the glass, sharp and clear and cold. She was no longer invisible. The fundraiser continued behind her, donors, board members, people whose names she had learned and forgotten and learned again. But up here, at the edge of the room where the view consumed everything, she needed silence. She needed to stand alone and remember that a year ago she was counting $17 in a delivery bag, wondering how long it would take to starve. The accounting degree hung on her apartment wall, framed beside her non-profit certification. Top of her class. The garage behind Marcus Webb's rental property had been sold, its money funneled into a foundation bearing her name. The Harper Housing Initiative. 43 women helped. 43 families housed. 43 people who had learned what it meant to stand on ground that belonged to them. She had not seen Rafael since that night on the balcony at the lodge, since his hand touched her face like she was something precious and fragile and worth saving. They had exchanged no words. No promises. Just the understanding that some things need space to become real, and that she needed to know, truly know, that she could stand without him holding her up. The texts had come anyway. After her licensing exam, "I am proud of you." After her graduation, flowers appeared in her apartment, white roses with no card, but she knew. Anonymous donations to her non-profit, always in amounts that meant something, $5,000, exactly the cost of moving one family to stable housing. $22,000, the amount she had borrowed and paid back by working triple shifts. He was watching her rise the way a general surveys a battlefield, not to control but to witness. Raphael's reflection appeared in the window beside hers before she heard his footsteps. Still in dark suits, still carrying danger like a second skin, but his eyes held something softer now, something that looked almost like peace. The scar running from his eye to his cheekbone caught the city lights. "Hello, Clara," he said. She turned. 1 year of silence collapsed into this single moment. He stood with his hands at his sides, and she realized he was nervous. Rafael Marino, who commanded men with a glance, who had erased Marcus Webb from existence and left Sophie Langford broken on the courthouse steps, was nervous. "You stayed away," Clara said. "Not a question. You needed to know you could stand on your own. That you did not need me to survive." His voice was steady, but something in his shoulders betrayed uncertainty. I watched you help a bleeding stranger in a church without hesitation. I found you freezing on a highway and you still carried that delivery bag like it mattered more than your own life. You lost everything and built yourself into something extraordinary, and he stopped, struggling with words that had no language in his world. I want to stop surviving and start living. With you. Clara saw beneath the power then. She saw the boy who had lost his brother to betrayal, the man who had spent decades moving through the world like a knife wrapped in ice, cutting through everything without feeling anything. She saw someone asking permission to be human. You gave me back my life, she said. No, pick cola. He moved closer, reaching for her hand. His touch was warm, certain. You saved yourself. I just made sure you had the space to do it. They stood together on the balcony, the city stretched below them, yachts gliding through dark water like ghosts in the night. The winter wind carried the smell of salt and distance. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, finally understanding that strength and gentleness were not opposites. They were the same person learning to choose. 3 months later, Clara walked through Miami on a clear winter night, stars sharp as diamonds overhead, frost coating the windows of closed shops. Emma, the 7-year-old girl from her non-profit, held her hand on one side. Rafael held it on the other. They had spent the afternoon at Emma's new home, stable, safe, funded by a grant Clara had written, filled with light from windows that belonged to her guardians now, not landlords. The girl had shown them her bedroom, her schoolwork, the drawing she had made of all 3 of them standing together. They passed a young delivery girl on a sputtering scooter, her machine struggling against the cold, her body hunched against the wind like Clara's had been a lifetime ago. Without thinking, Clara stopped and pressed a $100 bill into the girl's hands, along with a card. For when you are ready to stop running, Clara said. The girl stared, confused, grateful, tears beginning to form. Rafael watched Clara with undisguised love, and Emma squeezed between them, asking if they could get ice cream even though it was cold outside. They continued walking, and Clara spoke to the city, to the night, to Rafael. Do you ever think about that highway? About what would have happened if your convoy had not found me? Every day, Rafael said. And every day I am grateful I made the choice to stop driving past. She smiled. You did not just stop, Rafael. You saw me. That is rarer than you know. Marcus Webb disappeared from the earth entirely. Nobody ever found. His name became a cautionary tale whispered in certain circles, a name that meant what happened when you preyed on the powerless and those powerless had a protector. The 17 women he and Sophie had victimized had all been contacted by Clara's non-profit. All had received help. Some had already purchased their own homes. Sophie Langford sat in federal prison, 42 years ahead of her, all assets seized, her empire dismantled piece by piece. Every block of every neighborhood she had controlled was now in different hands. The rental market she had dominated was rewritten by Clara's legislative advocacy. Sophie watched it all from behind glass, understanding too late that some debts demand payment. Rafael transformed without losing his essence. Still dangerous, still powerful, but now channeling that force into protection. The Santoro family's legitimate businesses flourished. A foundation bearing his name funded housing for low-income families. His men had learned to follow a different code, that mercy was not weakness, that survival without living was just a slow death. And Clara went back to the church where everything had changed, where she had helped a wounded stranger without knowing he would save her life. She became a donor, funding its community services, the circle completing itself. She walked those halls as someone who had made it through, and every young person she met received the same message: you are not invisible. You are worth saving. And someone will see you. The final moment came on a night when Clara stood in the penthouse she now owned, looking out at Biscayne Bay, Raphael's arms around her from behind, Emma asleep in the guest room down the hall. This penthouse was hers. The deed bore her name. No landlord. No rent. No more running. I have something to ask you, Raphael said, and his voice carried the weight of vulnerability he had learned to live with. Something I should have asked a long time ago. He turned her around. His hand was steady as he reached into his pocket, but his eyes trembled like candlelight in wind. The ring was simple, elegant, without ostentation, a choice made by a man learning to love quietly. She said yes before he finished speaking. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications because tomorrow we have another story that will leave you speechless. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that they are never invisible, never worthless, never beyond saving. Drop a comment telling us, what would you have done in Clara's position? Your story matters. We will see you in the next one. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places.